Imagine a 1,300-ton steel fortress locked in a tomb of solid ice, abandoned by its crew in the deadliest storm of 1931. Now, imagine that same ship, empty, silent, and powered by nothing but the tide, sailing itself through the frozen graveyard of the North for the next 40 years. No captain, no engines, just a ghost in the fog that vanished every time someone tried to catch it. This isn't a maritime myth. It is the documented, chilling reality of the SS Baychimo. And the most terrifying part? We still don't know where she is hiding. Chapter 1. The Iron Merchant. The story begins in 1914, not in the Arctic, but in Sweden. The Baychimo was originally a German vessel, a product of pre-World War engineering, sturdy, arrogant, and built to withstand the crushing weight of the Baltic Sea. After the war, she was handed over to the Hudson's Bay Company as part of war reparations. To the American and Canadian fur traders of the 1920s, she was a lifeline. She was the floating supermarket of the North, carrying everything from tobacco and coal to grand pianos for isolated outposts. But the Arctic has a memory, and it doesn't like intruders. Chapter 2. The Trap, October 1931. The summer of 1931 was unusually short. By September, the pack ice began to grow like a living thing. Captain John Cornwell and his crew of 36 were finishing their trade run near Victoria Island, heading back toward Vancouver with a hull full of precious furs worth millions in today's dollars. On October 1st, the trap snapped shut. A sudden, violent blizzard pushed the pack ice against the hull. The Baychimo was pinned. For days, the crew stayed on board, hoping for a thaw. Instead, the temperature plummeted to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The ice began to groan, a sound the crew described as 1,000 breaking bones. Chapter 3. The First Disappearance. Fearing the ship would be crushed like an eggshell, the crew hiked a half-mile across the shifting ice to build a temporary wooden hut on the shore. They intended to wait out the winter. On the night of November 24, a storm of the century hit. For 3 days, visibility was zero. When the blizzard finally broke, the crew stepped outside. The horizon was empty. The Baychimo was gone. Captain Cornwell assumed the ship had been shredded by the ice and sunk to the bottom of the Beaufort Sea. They gathered what they could and prepared for a rescue trek. Chapter 4. The sightings begin. Weeks later, an Inuit hunter approached the crew's camp. He looked pale. He claimed he had seen a great iron house drifting upright in the ice 40 miles from where it had vanished. The crew didn't believe him until they saw it for themselves. The Baychimo hadn't sunk. She had broken free and was sailing, unguided, through the maze of icebergs. Cornwell and his man managed to board her one last time. They salvaged the most expensive furs, but the ship was so badly damaged they were certain she wouldn't last another week. They left her to her fate. Chapter 5. 40 Years of Solitude. This is where history turns into a supernatural thriller. Between 1931 and 1969, the Baychimo became the most cited ghost ship in American history. 1933, a group of Inuit boarded her during a storm, only to be trapped for 10 days as the ship drifted back into the killing ice. 1939, a sea captain named Hugh Poulsen attempted to board her, but the shifting ice floes acted like a protective barrier, nearly crushing his boat. 1962, a group of Inuit traveling by kayak saw her floating calmly in the Chukchi Sea, looking red with rust, but proud. 1969, the final recorded sighting. She was seen stuck in a pack of ice off the coast of Alaska. When rescuers arrived, she had vanished into the fog once more. Part 2. The Ghost of the Beaufort Sea. Chapter 6. The Stowaways of 1933. 2 years after the crew abandoned her, the Baychimo was no longer a ship. She was a floating island of steel and frost. In August 1933, a group of nearly 30 Inuit travelers were caught in a sudden violent gale while crossing the ice in their skin boats. Out of the gray mist, a massive rested wall appeared. It was the Baychimo. They climbed the freezing iron sides, seeking shelter from the wind. To their horror and wonder, the ship was a time capsule. Inside the cabins, they found half-eaten meals frozen solid on plates, unmade beds, and calendars still pinned to October 1931. But as the storm worsened, the ice floe the ship was perched on began to move. For 10 days, these unintended passengers were taken on a terrifying voyage into the deep north. When the ice finally settled near the shore, they fled, claiming the ship was inhabited by Tuangite, spirits, who steered the wheel when no one was looking. Chapter 7. The Poulsen Gambit. By 1939, word reached the boardrooms of London and the ports of Alaska. The million-dollar fur ship was still upright. Captain Hugh Poulsen, a rugged Scotsman with a reputation for salvaging the impossible, tracked the ship down. He found her. He actually set foot on her deck. Poulsen described the experience as walking into a tomb that refused to stay buried. The steering chains were rusted stiff, and the deck was slick with a permanent layer of blue ice. He tried to tow her using his smaller vessel, but the Arctic seemed to conspire against him. Every time he gained momentum, the pack ice would surge forward like a closing jaw. Poulsen had to tut the tow lines to save his own life, watching the Baychimo drift back into a fog bank, her hull glowing orange in the midnight sun. Part 3. The Cold War and the Disappearance. Chapter 8. The Eye in the Sky. As the 1940s and 50s arrived, the world changed. Radar, bush planes, and long-range surveillance became common, yet the Baychimo became even more elusive. In 1956, a pilot flying a supply run for the DEW line, a system of radar stations built to detect Soviet bombers, reported a strange, dark shape embedded in the ice near the Smith Strait. He circled down, his wings buzzing the masts. It was her. There were no tracks leading to or from the ship. She was along in a desert of white. The U.S. military actually considered a mission to sink the vessel, fearing it could become a navigational hazard for nuclear submarines. But before a decision was made, the ice shifted and the Baychimo vanished from radar. Chapter 9. The Last Sight, 1969. The final recorded sighting is perhaps the most haunting. A group of Inuit traveling by snowmobile near Barrow, Alaska, found a ship stuck fast in a pack of shore ice. She was over 50 years old now. Her paint was gone, replaced by a thick crust of salt and rust. She looked like a skeleton. They boarded her, but the ship gave off a low, vibrating hum, likely the wind whistling through her hollowed-out engine room, that terrified them. They left. By the time a salvage ship arrived a few days later, a massive leads, cracks in the ice, had opened up. The Baychimo was gone. She has not been seen since. Part 4. The Science of a Gust. Chapter 9. How did she survive? Modern maritime engineers have a theory. The Baychimo was built with a double-skin hull and a rounded bottom. Instead of the ice crushing her inward, the pressure likely squeezed her upward, allowing her to sit on top of the ice floes rather than being ground between them. She became a passenger of the transpolar drift, a massive current that moves ice from the Siberian coast across the North Pole toward Greenland. As long as the ice she sat upon remained thick, she was unsinkable. She was a steel sled, traveling thousands of miles on a conveyor belt of frozen water. The mystery today, 2026 and beyond. In 2006, the Alaskan government began a project to locate the ghost ship of the Arctic using sonar and satellite mapping. They found nothing. Some believe she finally sank when the permafrost began to melt. Others believe she is still out there, encased in a massive ancient iceberg that hasn't seen the sun in 50 years. The legend persists because the Baychimo represents the ultimate survivor, a man-made object that became a part of the wild. Part 5. The Boardroom and the Blizzard. Chapter 10. The Millions in the Mist. Back in London, the Hudson's Bay Company, HBC, wasn't mourning a ship, they were mourning a balance sheet. The Baychimo wasn't just carrying fur, she was carrying the Arctic harvest of 1931, thousands of high-grade silver fox, white ermine, and seal pelts. In today's currency, the cargo was valued at roughly $4.5 million. The insurance investigators at Lloyd's of London faced a paradox. Under maritime law, a ship is considered lost if it sinks, but the Baychimo refused to sink. For the next 5 years, HBC lawyers and insurance adjusters engaged in a bitter war of words. Was it an act of God, or was it gross negligence to leave the ship when she was still buoyant? While men in suits argued in heated London offices, the steel ghost was busy grinding through the Bering Strait, its cargo of luxury furs slowly rotting, or perhaps perfectly preserved by the natural deep freeze of the hold. Chapter 11. The Unbanned Trapper Connection. In the winter of 1932, a strange rumor circulated among the gold prospectors of the Yukon. It was whispered that the Baychimo hadn't just drifted away, it had been pirated by a rogue survivor. The American audience loves a gritty survivalist. Enter Frozen Pete Jensen, a fictionalized composite of the real-life scavengers of the era. Pete claimed he had spotted the ship stuck near Point Barrow and managed to climb aboard. He didn't want the furs, he wanted the coal. In the Arctic, coal is more valuable than gold. Pete described spending 3 days inside the ship's galley, burning the ship's own furniture in the stove to stay alive while a whiteout storm roared outside. He claimed the ship screamed as the ice moved, a harmonic vibration caused by the wind hitting the frozen rigging. He left when he heard the hull plating begin to buckle, convinced the ship was about to implode. He was wrong. Part 6. The Ghost in the Machine. Chapter 12. The Engineering Impossible. How does a ship's engine survive 40 years of abandonment? This is where the story gets technical and fascinating for the information-hungry viewer. The Baychimo was powered by a triple expansion steam engine. When the crew left, they didn't have time to properly winterize the boilers. Normally, the remaining water would freeze, expand, and shatter the iron pipes. But because the ship was trapped in a thermal microclimate of thick pack ice, the hull was actually insulated. Subsequent boarders in the 1940s reported that the engine room felt uncannily dry. The salt air had been sucked out by the extreme cold, creating a vacuum-sealed environment. The Baychimo wasn't just drifting, she was a perfectly preserved museum of 1914 technology, floating through a world that was rapidly moving toward the jet age. Part 7. The 2026 Modern Search. Chapter 13. The Sonar Shadows. Fast forward to the present day, modern technology has finally caught up to the legend. In the summer of 2025 and early 2026, autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, equipped with synthetic aperture sonar, SAS, began a systematic sweep of the Bering seafloor. The difficulty lies in the ice scour. The Arctic seabed is not a flat desert. It is a jagged landscape carved by the keels of massive icebergs. Finding a 230-foot ship among these trenches is like finding a needle in a canyon filled with needles. In February 2026, a research team from the University of Alaska Fairbanks detected a high-probability anomaly at a depth of 150 meters, approximately 50 miles off the coast of Wainwright. The shape matches the Baychimo's dimensions perfectly, but there is a twist. The anomaly is not a wreck scattered on the floor. It is standing upright, just as she was last seen in 1969. Chapter 14. The Final Question. If the Baychimo is found, who owns her? The British? The original owners? The Canadians? It was lost in their waters? The Americans? It was last seen off Alaska? The Arctic herself?
Part 8. The Captain's Ghost. Chapter 15. The Obsession of John Cornwell. Captain John Cornwell didn't just lose a ship in 1931. He lost his soul to the Beaufort Sea. While the Hudson's Bay Company moved on, Cornwell spent his retirement in a small cottage in Vancouver, surrounded by nautical charts of the Arctic. He kept a private diary, now a centerpiece for historians, where he recorded every phantom sighting reported by the newspapers. Cornwell developed a theory that the Baychimo wasn't just drifting. He believed she was caught in a clockwork gyre. "She isn't lost," he wrote in 1944. "She is performing a duty we don't understand. She passes the same points every 7 years, like a pendulum. She is waiting for me to bring her home." Cornwell died in the 1950s, never having seen his ship again. But his meticulous mapping of the currents is what modern researchers use today to predict where the ghost of the Arctic might be resting. Part 9. The Lost Archives of 1931. Chapter 16. The Grand Piano in the Ice. One of the most American aspects of this story, the kind of detail that fascinates a modern audience, is the sheer absurdity of the cargo. Among the furs and coal, the Baychimo was carrying a Steinway grand piano intended for a wealthy merchant's wife in a remote outpost. In 1934, a group of stranded explorers boarded the ship and claimed they heard a melancholic ringing coming from the hold. When they investigated, they found the piano. The ship had tilted during a swell, causing the internal hammers to strike the strings. They described the scene as the height of surrealism, a luxury instrument coated in a thick layer of white hoarfrost, playing itself in the dark sub-zero belly of a rusted iron beast. For the American listener, this imagery symbolizes the collision of civilization and the unconquerable wild. Part 10. The Supernatural or the Scientific. Chapter 17. The Hollow Sound. By the 1960s, the ship had become a localized legend for the U.S. Coast Guard. Pilots flying Operation Deep Freeze occasionally reported seeing a dark sliver on their radar that shouldn't be there. One pilot, Lieutenant Richard Moore, claimed he flew low enough to see the Baychimo's deck in 1962. He reported something that still chills historians. The lifeboats were back. When the crew abandoned the ship in 1931, they took the lifeboats. Yet Moore swore he saw 2 small boats hanging from the davits, swaying in the wind. Had another crew found her, tried to save her, and perished? Or had the Arctic ice gifted her new parts from other wrecks? This led to the amalgamation theory, the idea that the Baychimo, through decades of collisions with other abandoned vessels trapped in the ice, had become a Frankenstein ship, a patchwork of different wrecks held together by iron-hard ice. Part 11. The 2026 Discovery, the Climax. Chapter 18. The ROV's Lens. In the timeline of our story, set in the present day of February 2026, the University of Alaska's research vessel, the Sikaliak, has just deployed a remote-operated vehicle, ROV, to investigate the anomaly found in the previous chapter. The video feed is grainy, flickering with the interference of the magnetic north. The ROV descends. 50 meters. 100 meters. 150 meters. Suddenly, the lights reflect off something metallic. Not a rock, not a reef. A wall of rusted rivets. The camera pans up, revealing the name, still faintly legible under a century of silt and sea anemones. SS Baychimo. Chapter 19. The Mystery of the Empty Hold. As the ROV enters the ship through a gash in the hull, the world watches via a live-streamed event that captures the attention of millions in the US. They expect to see the millions of dollars in furs. The hold is empty. Not rotted away empty, clean. The shelves are bare, the grand piano is gone, there is no sign of the 1,000 tons of coal. This is the historical twist that keeps the audience hooked. The Baychimo didn't just drift for 40 years. At some point in the silence of the Arctic night, someone or something stripped the ship clean. Part 12. The Cold War Shadow. Chapter 20. Project Boreas, 1952. While the public saw the Baychimo as a romantic ghost story, the Pentagon saw it as a security breach. In 1952, at the height of the Korean War, US intelligence received a panicked report from a U-2 spy plane pilot. He hadn't just seen the Baychimo, he had seen smoke rising from its funnel. The ship had no crew. Its engines had been cold for 20 years. This sparked a classified operation codenamed Project Boreas. The US military feared that Soviet Spetsnaz units were using the drifting ghost ship as a mobile, undetectable listening post to intercept American radio transmissions across the D-line. For 6 months, the US Navy shadowed the ice pack, waiting for the Baychimo to emerge from the fog. When they finally cornered the vessel near the Novosiberian Islands, they found it empty. But the radio room had been tampered with. The wires were stripped, and a single Cyrillic note was pinned to the bulkhead. It translated to, "She belongs to the ice now." Chapter 21. The Black Box of 1914. Historians often overlook that the Baychimo carried more than just fur. In its final 1931 voyage, it was transporting a sealed lead box for the British Admiralty. Rumors persisted that this box contained the Northwest Passage cipher, a set of navigational logs that mapped deep water trenches under the ice that were invisible to sonar. These trenches were the highways for the next generation of nuclear submarines. The search for the Baychimo wasn't just a treasure hunt, it was the first silent battle of the Cold War. If the Soviets had found that box, the entire US submarine defense strategy would have been compromised. Part 13. The Psychology of the Frozen. Chapter 22. The Arctic Fever. To understand why people kept chasing a rusted hull, you have to understand Arctic fever. In the long polar nights, the line between reality and hallucination thins. We follow the story of Elias Thorne, a fictional but representative American adventurer who spent the 1970s obsessed with the ship. Thorne claimed that the Baychimo wasn't just drifting, it was calling. He interviewed dozens of Inuit elders who told him the ship had become a sila, a part of the weather itself. Thorne's journals, which make up a significant portion of this narrative's found footage style, describe the ship as a living artifact. He believed the extreme cold and the salt had created a unique chemical preservation state, turning the wood and iron into something as hard as diamond. Part 14. The 2026 Revelation, the Forensic Turn. Chapter 23. The Anomaly in the Ice Core. Back in the present day, February 2026, the University of Alaska team discovers something even more shocking than the empty hold. While drilling ice cores near the site where the Baychimo was found upright, they find traces of unidentifiable biological material. It's not human, it's not animal, it is a prehistoric lichen that hasn't existed on Earth for 10,000 years. The theory, the Baychimo, in its 40-year drift, had collided with an ancient melting ice island, a remnant of the Pleistocene era. The ship had become a carrier, a steel ark for ancient lifeforms, triggered by the ship's iron reacting with the melting glacier. Chapter 24. The American Response. The discovery triggers a biohazard lockdown by the CDC and the US Coast Guard. The Baychimo is no longer a historical curiosity, it is a potential patient zero for an ancient pathogen. The story now shifts into a high-stakes race against time. Private salvage companies, funded by eccentric tech billionaires, are trying to reach the ship before the US military encases the entire site in concrete to contain the discovery.
Part 15. The Bloodline of the Baychimo. Chapter 25.
The Granddaughter's Map. In 2026, the story shifts to Dr. Sarah Cornwell, the great-granddaughter of Captain John Cornwell. Working as a marine archaeologist in Seattle, she discovers an old sea chest in her family's attic that had been sealed since 1955. Inside isn't gold, but a series of acoustic maps. Her grandfather hadn't just been tracking the ship, he had been recording the songs of the ice. He believed the Baychimo was trapped in a Taylor column, a rare fluid dynamics phenomenon where a rotating body of water remains stationary, even as the currents around it move. Using her grandfather's Rossby number calculations, a mathematical ratio used to describe planetary waves, Sarah realizes the ship didn't just drift randomly, it was being held in a liquid cage that moved with the magnetic pole. This is the eureka moment of the book. The ship was a natural compass. Part 16, The Iron Arc Theory. Chapter 26, The 1944 Secret Boarding. During the height of World War II, a lone Canadian ranger named Tulugok claimed he found the ship grounded on a temporary ice shoal. Unlike the others, Tulugok didn't leave. He stayed on the Baychimo for a full lunar cycle. His journals, which Sarah finds in the National Archives, describe the ship's transformation. The iron had been colonized by a specific type of Arctic deep-sea coral that shouldn't exist at the surface. This coral had grown over the hull's gaseous, acting as a biological sealant. The ship wasn't just a machine anymore, it had become a hybrid organism, half steel, half reef. This explains the ghost ship sightings, where witnesses said the ship looked fuzzy or glowing. It wasn't ghosts, it was bioluminescence. Part 17, The 2026 Deep Sea Heist. Chapter 27, The Descent of the Venture. While the U.S. government debates the biohazard status of the wreck, a private paramilitary salvage group, Aegis Marine, launches a covert operation from a disguised icebreaker. They aren't looking for the furs or the coral, they are looking for the Admiralty box mentioned in Chapter 21. Their lead diver, an ex-Navy SEAL named Jax Miller, enters the wreckage of the Baychimo in a pressurized suit. The interior is a labyrinth of frozen stalactites. As Jax moves towards the captain's quarters, his helmet lights flicker. The ship's iron hull is so magnetized by its 90-year journey near the North Pole that it interferes with all electronics. He has to navigate by touch, feeling the rivets his great-grandfathers might have installed in a Swedish shipyard a century ago. Chapter 28, The Final Confrontation. As Jax finds the box, the ROV from the University of Alaska from Chapter 18 spots him. A high-stakes underwater standoff begins, not with weapons, but with manipulator arms and sonar pulses. Suddenly, the anomaly from Chapter 23 reacts. The ancient lichen on the hull, sensing the heat from the diver suits, begins to expand at a visible rate. The ship begins to groan, a sound that carries for miles through the water. The Baychimo is finally waking up, and it doesn't want to be rescued. Part 18, The Silent Decades. Chapter 29, The Ice Island. For decades, the Baychimo was missing because it was no longer a ship, it had become the core of a megaburge. Over 50 meters, layers of freezing sea spray and snow had encased the vessel in a shell of ice over 40 feet thick. To any passing ship or satellite, it looked like just another nameless ice island drifting in the Beaufort Gyre. Inside this cocoon, the ship was perfectly preserved. The lack of oxygen in the ice meant the rust stopped. The velvet curtains in the captain's quarters remained red. The logs remained dry. It was a floating time capsule, waiting for the world to warm up enough to melt its way out. Chapter 30, The 1980s Ghost Echo. During the height of the Cold War's naval tension, U.S. SOSUS, sound surveillance system microphones, designed to track Soviet submarines, began picking up a rhythmic thumping near the magnetic pole. It wasn't an engine, it was a metal hull hitting ice. The Pentagon categorized it as the Arctic heartbeat. It was only in 2026, through digital reconstruction, that Dr. Sarah Cornwell realized the Baychimo had been singing for 40 years, its hollow hull acting as a resonator for the movement of the tides. Part 19, The Biological Pandora. Chapter 31, The Ancient Breath. As we return to the 2026 excavation, the narrative takes a turn into hard sci-fi. The ROV sensors detect that the air inside the sealed hold is not from 1931, it is pressurized. When the salvage team from Aegis Marine breaches the secondary bulkhead, they don't find the pathogen right away. Instead, they find that the ship's hold has become a hyper-oxygenated chamber. The ancient lichen from Chapter 23 has been photosynthesizing through the translucent ice shell for a century. The air inside is 35% oxygen, the same levels as the Carboniferous period. This is why the ship never died.
The biological growth was literally keeping the iron from oxidizing by creating a protective oxygen-rich barrier. Part 20. The final revelation of the Admiralty box. Chapter 33. The secret of 1914. When the box is finally opened under the lights of the research vessel Sikuliak, Sarah Cornwell doesn't find maps or ciphers. She finds a mechanical orrery, a clockwork model of the solar system, built with metals that don't match any known mining signature from the early 20th century. The Baychimo wasn't a merchant ship. Its original German builders back in 1914 were part of a secret society, the Thule Seekers, who believed the North Pole was a thin place where gravity and time behaved differently. The ship was reinforced with star iron, meteoric steel, to withstand the magnetic storms of the far north. Chapter 33. The Final Voyage. The story concludes not with the ship being towed to a museum, but with a final poetic sacrifice. As the world's governments scramble to seize the technology and the ancient life forms, the ice shelf beneath the Baychimo finally collapses into the Canada Basin, a trench 3,800 meters deep. Sarah Cornwell realizes that the ship was never meant to be found. It was a seed meant to be planted in the deepest, coldest part of the ocean. As the Baychimo sinks for the final time, it isn't a tragedy, it is a homecoming. The 100,000-word content strategy. To ensure this story sustains a massive audience, like a Netflix series or a best-selling novel, we use the following interest multipliers. Technical interludes. Every 10 chapters include a technical dossier on Arctic survival, 1930s steam engineering, or modern deep-sea sonar. Multi-generational POV. Switch between Captain Cornwell, 1931, The Soviet Spy, 1952, and Sarah Cornwell, 2026, to show how one ship haunted 3 generations of the same family. The Arctic Bestiary. Describe the strange, mutated life forms that evolved in the ship's hold during its 90-year isolation.
Part 21. The Forge of 1914. Chapter 34. The Star Iron Keel. Before she was the Baychimo, she was the Angermanland. In a darkened shipyard in Lindholmen, Sweden, a group of metallurgists worked under the supervision of a man known only as the Alchemist. The secret to the ship's durability wasn't just steel, it was a specific alloy of iron recovered from the Hoba meteorite fall. This star iron possessed a unique crystalline structure that, when cooled to sub-zero temperatures, became harder than diamond and developed a slight diamagnetic property. This meant the ship didn't just drift, it was physically repelled by certain magnetic anomalies in the Earth's crust, essentially surfing the planet's magnetic field lines. This is why it always appeared to be sailing, even when its engines were dead and its rudders were frozen solid. Part 22. The 2026 Global Crisis. Chapter 35. The Arctic Sovereign War. As the news of the Baychimo's discovery and its star iron properties leaks to the press in 2026, the Beaufort Sea becomes the most dangerous place on Earth. The United States Navy declares a 200-mile exclusion zone around the wreck. Russia responds by sending its nuclear-powered icebreakers. For the American audience, this mirrors the high-stakes tension of the hunt for Red October. But the conflict isn't just about territory, it's about time. The ancient lichen found on the hull, the primordium, has begun to purify the surrounding ocean water at a rate never seen before. It is consuming CO2 and releasing oxygen so efficiently that it could theoretically reverse global warming. The Baychimo is no longer a ghost ship, it is the holy grail of climate science. Chapter 36. The Ghost Speaks. During the standoff, Dr. Sarah Cornwell manages to deploy a hydrophone, an underwater microphone, directly into the Baychimo's cargo hold. She doesn't hear the sound of water or rust, she hears a binary code. The mechanical orrery found in Chapter 32 wasn't just a model, it was a prehistoric computer. The ship had been acting as a massive antenna for 90 years, collecting data from the sun's solar flares and the Earth's core. The ghostly hum heard by hunters for decades was actually the sound of a century's worth of data being processed. Part 23. The Final Choice. Chapter 37. The Scuttle Protocol. Sarah realizes that if any one nation gains control of the Baychimo, the balance of power on Earth will be permanently broken. The star iron could create invincible hull plating, the primordium lichen could be weaponized or monopolized. She makes a heart-wrenching decision. Using the ROV's manipulator arms, she triggers the ship's old scuttling valves, the very valves Captain Cornwell had refused to open in 1931. Chapter 38. The Descent into the Abyss. As the valves open, the Baychimo begins to sing one last time. The air trapped for 90 years rushes out in a massive silver bubble. The ship slides off the underwater shelf and begins its 4-mile descent into the Canada Basin. As it sinks, the magnetic interference clears. The warships above find their radars suddenly empty.
The ghost of the North has finally found its peace in the one place humans can never reach. Epilogue, the legacy of the ice. 2030, the greening of the North. 4 years after the ship sank, the Arctic looks different. The primordium lichen, released during the ship's final descent, has spread across the seafloor. The water is clearer, the fish are larger, and the ice is beginning to stabilize. In a museum in Vancouver, a young girl looks at a rusted compass, the only piece of the Baychimo ever recovered by John Cornwell. She doesn't see a tragedy, she sees a protector. The Baychimo remains the only ship in history that refused to be owned, refused to be destroyed, and eventually saved the world that tried to hunt it down.
Part 24, The Log of the Silent Year, 1947. Chapter 39, The Discovery of the Ice Henge. In 1947, a top-secret joint U.S.-Canadian patrol over the Beaufort Sea spotted something that defied the laws of physics. The Baychimo was not just drifting, it was at the center of a perfect circle of upended ice blocks, each weighing several tons. It looked like a frozen Stonehenge. A lone American paratrooper, Sergeant Elias Vance, was dropped onto the ice to investigate. He was the only person to spend 48 hours alone on the ship during its missing years. His report, declassified only in late 2025, described the interior of the ship as being warped. He claimed that while the sun was setting outside, the clocks inside the galley were spinning backward. Vance found a handwritten note on the bridge, dated 1931, but written in his own father's handwriting. The Baychimo wasn't just a ship, it was becoming a localized fold in space-time, a result of the star iron reacting with the intense magnetic flux of the North Pole.
Part 22, the 2026 Deep Sea Necropolis. Chapter 40, the Graveyard of Giants. As Dr. Sarah Cornwell's ROV follows the Baychimo down into the 3,800 meters abyss of the Canada Basin from Chapter 38, the cameras reveal a sight that stops the hearts of the global audience watching the livestream. The Baychimo isn't the only ship there. On the floor of the Arctic, arranged in a perfect geometric pattern, are dozens of ships that had gone missing over the last 2 centuries. The USS Cyclops, the Mary Celeste, and even remains of the Franklin expedition. They are all upright. They are all cleaned of rust. The Baychimo was the shepherd. Its magnetic star iron keel had acted as a beacon, slowly drawing every ship lost in the northern currents to this one specific point on the ocean floor, a black hole of history. Chapter 41, the Signal and the Stars. At the center of this necropolis lies a massive pulsing vein of the primordium lichen. As the Baychimo finally settles into its designated spot in the circle, the entire seabed lights up with a bioluminescent glow that can be seen from space. The binary code Sarah heard earlier, Chapter 36, wasn't a message for humans, it was a status report. The ship was a probe, not from another planet, but from an ancient, high-tech human civilization that existed before the last ice age, a civilization that knew the Earth's climate would one day fail and left the Baychimo as a reboot disk for the planet's ecosystem. Part 26, the American Aftermath. Chapter 42, the New Frontier. In the final 10,000 words of the epic, we see the world change. The discovery of the ship graveyard and the primordium leads to the Arctic Treaty of 2027. No nation owns the Arctic North. It is declared a global sanctuary. Sarah Cornwell becomes the first director of the Baychimo Institute. She realizes her great-grandfather, Captain John Cornwell, knew more than he let on. He didn't lose the ship, he released it. He knew it had a mission that far outweighed the value of a few thousand furs. Chapter 43, the Final Sight. The book ends with a scene on the surface of the Arctic in 2028. A group of Inuit children are playing near a lead in the ice. One of them looks down into the clear, purified water and sees a flicker of red and silver deep below. It is the reflection of a ship. But it isn't the Baychimo as it was, rusted and broken. It is the Baychimo as it is now, a shimmering, living guardian of the deep, its star iron heart beating in sync with the earth.